we go. It is a great honor to be on this stage, my first time on a bishop's stage. It took me a whole school career and a further 20 years, but I finally made it. I scored my first rugby try on this field when it was a rugby field, and that was actually just over the dead ball line. I thought that was the try line. That was, I think, the under 13 Ds. I wasn't really an academic. I wasn't sporty. I enjoyed art, but I was your perfect average at Bishops. But I just want to tell you our tale after the fact. I mean, 80% of your learnings, if we look at the 80-20 rule, 80% of it is after school, and I'm continuously learning. I want to tell you our tale of youthful business naivety, the serendipity of finding business partners online, the scale of open source, and through the power of sequence and hard graft, how we found our 10-year overnight success. A lot of people say, WooThemes, never heard of it, it just came out of nowhere, but it was 10 years in the making. Thank you to Annette for providing a great framework and very relevant lessons. I feel like we're the perfect case study for what you've just mentioned. So I hope it flows nicely. And of course, thank you to Heavy Chef and the OD committee for having me here. It is a real privilege. Before I tell you a bit about our story in WooCommerce, just a bit of context as to where I am now. It's been about, May 2015 is when our acquisition happened. And I worked quite a long period with Automatic thereafter, the company that acquired us, that owns WordPress.com. And I've made some investments in some exciting tech startups here in Cape Town, and I spend quite a bit of time with them. And like Annette, share a background, or a family background in farming as well, so even do a bit of strategy around avo farming and our avo farming business that's gone into a whole bunch of other types of fintech startups actually. And of course, embracing chaos at home. I'm fortunate to have so much time now available to me to be with my family, and these are my two little boys. One of them here is at the pre-prep, and the other one, who looks like he doesn't want to be there, is hopefully going to be here one day. So Annette's already gauged the audience as to who knows WordPress. For those who don't, and for those who do, but perhaps don't know the latest stats, they now power about 31% of the internet. I'm not going to talk about the millions of sites that is, because we're not entirely sure. But it's anyone from hobby blogs to some of the biggest sites online. And that's the New York Post, Spotify, CNN, Facebook, Microsoft, and then all sorts of news publications like The Sun, I think the Washington Post, Time. It's more of an operating system for the internet these days. And back in 2006, when I discovered it, it was actually 3 years old already. Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress and the owner of Automatic, he found this system that had existed before that, and he forked it, which is a term used when you take open source software and you make some tweaks to it, and then you redistribute it. But it was a blogging platform back then, and this was, a time before sort of Instagram and Twitter, which Twitter sort of stole a lot of the market in terms of blogging. Everyone now is lazy and they microblog in a few characters, but back then this was a big trend, and more people were using it outside of blogging and using it to power their websites. But very basically, this was the default theme that was packaged with WordPress around 2006. It actually served WordPress for about 4 years. And the most customization that really happened to it was a different header, perhaps some different widgets in the sidebar, a menu, and maybe a background tweak. And this was my website, which was the Kubrick theme. And I'd just taken it and I'd reskinned it and I added a bit of custom code. My background, I studied at UCT, I did information systems, and before that I did a digital design diploma, design background like Fred. Yeah, I was blogging alongside Fred actually. Fred is a geek at heart, and back in early 2000 he had an amazing blog that I followed, and we often commented on each other's blogs, and we were pretty geeky like that. But through my WordPress-powered blog, I met quite a few people who would just leave random comments on my blog posts. And little did I know that this was the social network of my future, really. This is where I met my business partners. ADPNa, a Cape Townian, and Magnus, who was the Norwegian. And I was living in London at the time after UCT with my then girlfriend, my now wife, who's sitting in the second row, smack bang in the middle here. I think it's the first time she's come to hear me speak, and she chooses to sit right there, so it's quite distracting. But yeah, as I said, I met Magnus through my site. AD was playing around with a revolutionary theme for WordPress, and he enjoyed my design style. He was more of a finance guy who was hacking together code and was doing pretty well at that, and he managed to build some cool custom functionality like a tabber, which was not actually available within WordPress, where you could show your most popular posts and the most commented posts, which now is just trivial stuff. But he asked me if I would like to take his theme and on a 50-50 profit-sharing basis, reskin it with my own flavor and then sell it on his website premium news theme, hence the PNT. And I took the CNN website of the time and I literally copied CSS from it. And I like the colors and I like the menu, and you can see we had this little slideshow tab, which was pretty cool. And I put this up on his premium news theme site. It was the same sort of work that I'd been doing day in, day out as a web designer in London, just playing around with that Kubrick theme for clients. And we repackaged it as an off-the-shelf template. And instead of selling my time, I was now selling a physical, digital product. And I think at the time it was about $45 to $50 that we were selling it at. Put it up on premium news theme late in the evening, and woke up the next morning and I had these little e-receipts in my inbox, and it was sales that had been made, and I think I made about 8 to 10 sales on the first night. And all of a sudden I was like mind blown. This is like much better than charging for my time, and something I really want to consider in terms of a future. Like there and then I decided like there's something in this. And at the same time, AD had offered the same opportunity to Magnus in Norway, who had a similar background to me, but he was better with code. He was more of a programmer. And he took the same theme and he reskinned it slightly differently to mine, and he released it as Newspress, and all of a sudden we had 3 themes on premiumnewstheme.com. And I mean, beautiful, youthful business naivety. We didn't realize this was a business. This was just a profit share between complete strangers. But yeah, we created these first 3 themes, and we decided let's make more themes and let's stick with this 50-50 profit share. 3 themes became 6 themes, and those 10 themes on night 1 became 100 within the first week, and it just grew and grew and grew. The momentum was there, and WordPress obviously was under-catered for in terms of beautiful design and being open source. Everything that had come before it was freely available, which meant the people that were building these products for it weren't investing the time to support it. They were giving back to the community in terms of a product, but then sort of forgotten about. And we were lucky to be at the right time at the right place, alongside one other guy in America who was doing a similar thing called Brian Gardner. And we decided we started working together in 2007. By July 2008, we realized, hey, there's going to be a tax bill, and we actually need to start thinking about our structures. And Adi had been at Stellenbosch, and he dropped out of finance in second year, but he was the finance guy. So he registered a company in South Africa for us. And yeah, hindsight, obviously, that's not the best place to register a global business. But it served its purpose, and we relaunched Premium News Theme as Woo Themes. That was our name that we came up with after about a 20-minute Skype session. And Woo we thought was quite a cool sort of geeky word, leet speak from gaming. Magnus was a big gamer, so I didn't know this word, but Woo, woot is a sort of a greeting that gamers use. And we tried to look for more meaning later on, and Woo stands for winning others over, so we thought that was a little bit more impressive. Our quest was to make beautiful web design accessible and affordable. And with this growing catalog of themes that the three of us were making, we thought people like the diversification. They like these various design styles that each of us have. So let's just try and think, how can we sort of make that a bit of a bigger offering? So we decided to collaborate, and instead of offering the profit share, we decided we would pay these guys a handsome once-off fee for coming up with a homepage design and a single post design. And we went, this was, as I said, very early days of Twitter now, and it was before Instagram, where a lot of messaging happens, where you try and contact these big influencers. We did it through contact forms on their WordPress sites if they had, or we tried to track down an email address. These three people are some of the examples. Tim Van Dam, he was at GoWala, which was one of the big sort of unicorns of 2008 or so. He then went on to Instagram. He worked there on the early team, and he then went on to Dropbox. Sarah Parmenter was one of the best designers at the time in the UK. She won all sorts of awards, like the .NET Designer of the Year. And John Hicks, this Englishman smoking a pipe, he designed the Firefox logo that many of you have probably interacted with, many of the Skype icons, and as well as the Spotify icons. So these guys were big names, and we leveraged their amazing skills, but also their audiences. And yeah, they would write about these collaborations that they were doing with Woo themes on their blogs, and that would drive us all sorts of traffic. And this picture that I started with at the beginning, with that clickbait title, that was what happened 16 months after we registered Woo Themes. That was the first time we met physically. We'd not even spoken a word on the phone. Magnus didn't like his Norwegian accent, and for some reason, we just defaulted to Skype text the whole time, and we never asked any questions, and we only realized here that we never heard each other's voices. But this was in the middle of London at the Future Web Design Conference, which we decided was going to be where we wanted to meet. And we met a whole bunch of those other influencers, those web designers that we'd worked with previously. By 2010, we had a very big collection of themes, over 100 themes, and they were in all sorts of theme categories. We had business themes, classified themes, video blogging themes, photographers' themes, and then we also built more and more functionality into these themes. And we catered even for real estate agents and restaurants. We built booking systems for restaurants. And we built all this code and baked it all into a theme, which is a horrible way to do it, because people who buy our themes are generally web designers and they want to customize it. And all of a sudden they're customizing a code base that we then need to support, and support became a very big hassle for us. And that was our first initial hires were support officers from around the world. Over time we realized that plugins, I saw a lot of hands of people who are familiar with WordPress. The ways to customize your WordPress site are through themes and plugins is where you bake functionality. And yeah, over these 100 themes, we learned a lot about our customers, and we realized that business themes was the breadwinner for us, and we doubled down on that. And we listened to our customers, and we engaged with them in the support forums. All three of us founders, we were in the support forums every day. We had daily competitions, who could answer the most amount of support tickets. Magnus always won those competitions. And what customers were asking for more and more, specifically within business themes, was e-commerce functionality. This is 2010 WordPress. It was a system that was evolving from a blogging platform into a content management system. It was quite an unstable code base, and to then build e-commerce functionality on top of that. A couple people had experimented with it before, and we tried to work with those individuals and play around with their plugins and see if it could be the system that powered our themes, our e-commerce themes that we were dreaming about. But it was too much work, and we decided we knew design really well, and e-commerce needed to be beautiful within WordPress. So we went and we looked for developers who were well versed in e-commerce, and that was difficult at the time. Magento was the system that everyone was using, which was a very beefy system and also open source, but very difficult to customize, and it didn't have the community that WordPress had. We went through about 3 sets of developers to try and build out this e-commerce engine. We failed 3 times. We spent a whole bunch of money on these developers. Eventually, some of the guys we'd worked with previously on those restaurant-based themes, on those real estate systems themes, we outsourced a lot of that functionality to freelancers, and we realized that there were some guys very capable under our nose. We brought them into the team, and we spent the next sort of 6 months building out this e-commerce engine, thinking that the future was we were going to be selling even more business themes with e-commerce being the enabler, but we weren't thinking through the business model of this e-commerce engine. September 2011 is when we actually officially launched WooCommerce, and at the time TechCrunch was a really big thing, so was Mashable. We made it to the front page of those 2 sites, and it was a big story, and we got loads of traffic. We didn't sell much on day 1, but there were a lot of people talking about WordPress and could it be capable of supporting e-commerce stores. And we built some themes for it. So for September 2011, we built 3 themes, and we thought we were going to be selling these at about $70 a pop. And we did sell some, but we underestimated open source and the power of open source and the scale of the community that supported WordPress and the amount of people and designers and developers who saw this toolkit that we were building as perfect for their client bases, and they took our code base on GitHub and they started playing around with it, and they started contributing to it, and they started enabling us in all sorts of parts of the world through building payment gateway integrations. We built an integration with PayPal because we thought global reach, that's a good place to start. All of a sudden, we had integrations in India and Canada and the UK, and there was this beautiful flow of code and people working together, and not just us making money through our themes, but all of a sudden these other developers were putting up extensions, which are basically plugins on top of plugins, on their own sites and selling those, and they were making money off WooCommerce. And sorry, as you can see these pictures, very quickly, the code was more than code, it was community, and people started meeting around the world. And WordPress, since its inception, has had all sorts of word camps, which are gatherings of WordPress folk, very geeky events. That's what I'm used to speaking at. These word camps, there'd be people starting to speak about WooCommerce at those events, and then all of a sudden people asking if they could host WooCommerce specific meetups. And we started having meetups in Singapore and Hong Kong and in the Biscuit Mill and all over the world. Today we have over 70 meetup groups in operation, hosting events every week. So as you can see, over a very quick period from 2011, we were opening doors all around the world, and our global expansion was happening before our eyes with very little strategy from ourselves. In 2013, amongst all this crazy growth, ADPNa decided to leave us. He's a serial entrepreneur at heart, and he was keen to go and start something new, and we were sort of amazed that this was happening at that time because we were experiencing this incredible hockey stick growth. And it was a forced rethink of our business. And these three musketeers that were working together, I'd subsequently, after being working in the UK, moved back to Cape Town and was working in an office with AD. All of a sudden we had to think, okay, what does this mean? A founder buyout is often very much like a divorce, and it was a very tricky period for us as we're trying to navigate this incredible growth and supporting this beast of a platform. And this is in Magnus's hometown of Stavanger. It's Pulpit Rock, and yeah, we went to visit him in Norway, and yeah, this was a daunting time for us, and we decided we were going to pay AD out in a profit share, in an earn-out basis, and we didn't want to take on any funding. We were starting to get approached by a lot of venture capitalists, keen to find out more about this open source ecosystem and how it could play with venture capital money. But we'd been profitable from day one. We were bootstrapped, and we wanted to continue that way. And in 2014, we decided to branch outside of the WordPress ecosystem that had sort of sustained us over these years. And we went to our first e-commerce gathering in Chicago at IRCE. And from being the biggest fish in the WordPress lake, we were suddenly a very small fish in a big e-commerce ocean. And this was our little stand that we had. And we met all sorts of partners here. Again, we met more VC firms who'd heard of us and came to the event specifically to meet with us at this little booth. And it was hard to ignore all these VCs approaching us and throwing around crazy numbers as to where they could take us and how much money they wanted to put into our platform. And we continued communicating with a couple of these VCs, and it was a fascinating period of learning for myself and Magnus. And we signed a term sheet with a VC after much deliberation, and we started thinking about how we can take this to a truly global scale. We were running hundreds of thousands of sites, but we realized that the market was in the millions, and the transactional volumes that we could be doing was in the billions. And there was a lot of money to be made in extensions and through payment gateways. And these guys were looking at WordPress and e-commerce through a fresh lens for us. And in 2014, after IRCE and seeing what was happening there and witnessing what was happening within our community with these meetups, we decided to host our first conference, and that was in San Francisco. We took our remote team of about 45 people to San Francisco, and we hosted this on the doorstep of Twitter's HQ. And at this event, in the midst of all this VC talk and having signed a term sheet, we got approached by Automatic, and we engaged with them as to where we were. They were excited to see this growth. They were excited to see how we were growing our team so similarly to the way that they were building out their community, their ecosystem. And yeah, we started speaking about, could this be a sort of joint venture between Automatic and a VC partner? Long story short, it couldn't work that way. I think we realized that Automatic was our perfect partner. It was a company that was run by the founder of WordPress. He had incredible knowledge of scaling WordPress, and he was incredibly excited about e-commerce. And Automatic needed to own that chapter because it's a significant chapter of WordPress's future. And from going from a due diligence with a VC very quickly into a due diligence around an acquisition, we ended up in May 2015 signing our agreement. This is Matt Mullenweg holding a glass of champagne on a jet, of course. And this is me at Domesy Attorneys here in Liesbeek Parkway. And you can see Magnus on a screen there at his home office. And that night I went to Burger King and celebrated with my kids. And a few weeks later we were in New York, and we were at Matt Mullenweg's home in Soho, one of his 3 homes. And we were on top of the Rockefeller celebrating. And looking back at all of this, I mean, it still blows my mind. This period was such a haze because it was so fast moving, and I had young kids at the same time, and lots of distractions everywhere, but an incredibly fortunate journey that we went on. And just to show you the sort of growth over the years, you're not going to be able to read these numbers. As I said, in 2012, we actually had 300,000 downloads. Fast forward a few years to 2015, we had 6.6 million downloads. 2017, we've had 33 million downloads, and I just checked yesterday, we're about 50 million downloads of WooCommerce. Now, that is a bit of a vanity metric. What we focus on is the active stores, and at the moment, we believe there are about 600,000 very active stores on WooCommerce, and the sort of numbers they're doing is staggering. This is $8 billion of total processing volume that we believe is going through WooCommerce this year. And we've got incredible relationships with PayPal, with Stripe, with Authorize.net, with the biggest payment gateways in the world. And Automatic, as they said they would, they've managed to scale this system, the operations, the people. And I'm going to talk a bit about our sort of remote setup. I don't want to go on for too long, but I think, as Annette has said, building a remote team is very much the future, especially in the tech world. Automatic currently has 750 staff from 57 countries. At the time of acquisition, we were about 50 staff, and I think we were across 20, 25 countries. So it was a perfect marriage of companies and systems, the way we were building. And our team was incredibly diverse, and people had amazing lifestyles, and we was supporting their families and their nomadic travels. Some examples here, we've got Maria Sharapova, not Sharapova, I think she's a tennis player, Scarpello, that's it. And she travels around the world in an RV. Travels around America in an RV, and she's got a side project which is the Roaming Pint, and she goes from craft brewery to craft brewery reviewing craft beer with her husband, which is pretty cool. We've had a guy work from Thailand. By day he was scuba diving, and at lunch it looks like he's doing a bit of work, but most of his work would be done at night. Mike Krapp, he is a full-time firefighter from Ohio. He was putting out fires physically, and digitally he was our head of support. He was running our biggest team, and he was a full-time fireman. And we would have moments in our leadership hangouts on Google Hangouts where he says, "Sorry guys, I've got to run off to a drug bust," or "There's been a car accident, I need to go." So he was sort of our superhero. And then we've had guys who are true remote nomadic workers, like Will, who worked from Antarctica, not with WooThemes, before WooThemes. And this is him and Dwayne. Dwayne was living with his wife, who was a full-time doctor on a cruise liner, and he was doing work on the open seas. And this is Magnus working from his Tesla, just showing off a bit. Norway's had Teslas for a few years, and this was him prior to a surf, doing a bit of, as I said, support forum work. I think he's actually driving here, or the car's driving itself whilst he's doing some work. And Automatic are truly at the forefront of remote distributed working. They've actually closed down their office, and they had a beautiful big warehouse space in San Francisco in the piers. They've shut it down because they had about 3 people rock up there every day. And because they want to be the story of the future, and that is, in the tech world, potentially without physical office spaces. So being a remote worker, communication is oxygen, and there's synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. And synchronous communication is often done in Slack, but being a remote worker working across various time zones, you've got to be really good at documenting things concisely so that people who are waking up in the morning don't want to see a flood of communications. So we would also have WordPress sites. Automatic eats its own dog food. They created this system called a P2, which is like an internal blog, and there all project information is shared. It's sort of like a Basecamp, but it's WordPress's equivalent. You can go to the p2theme.com and you can actually see it, and it's open source and use it. So we'd stay synchronized through Zoom and through Google Hangouts. We'd have team meetings once a week. We'd have town halls once a month, but like we are opposed to meetings. Matt Mullenweg is to the extreme. He likes to have as few meetings as possible. Everything should be documented digitally. We would have onboarding hangouts. As our team scaled so quickly, we would introduce them, and Maria from her RV would have a hangout, and we would get as many people onto a Google Hangout as possible. And we would have an hour conversation with this new recruit and learn more about them. And this is Jay, one of the original developers of WooCommerce, one of those two guys that we found early on. And he loves rats, and that's his rat cage behind him. And he leads our design front. I think he actually had a rat on his shoulder during this hangout. This is an example of one of those P2s. And at Automatic, we measure output, not input. And the recruitment drive is an incredibly important part of the process in building our teams. Matt meets with every individual coming into the team. He has the final interview with everyone. That's done over Slack now. It used to be a phone call, but 750 staff growing very quickly every month. That's tricky to scale. But as Annette said, it's all about trust. It's all about autonomy. And it's so tricky. I get asked all the time as to how do we take our team that's sitting in an office and go remote, thinking firstly that it's going to be a cost saving. It's not. It can be incredibly expensive, and meetups are something that are vitally important for distributed remote workforces. So we would meet once a year. This is the team in Cape Town. We've met in Saalbach, Austria on the ski slopes. We've met in Chicago. We've met all over the place. I think they've just met in Mexico. The teams get together at Automatic once every, I think they have 2 meetups a year, minimum. Usually it's about 3 or 4 meetups. And this is the grand meetup that happens once a year. And this is incredibly tricky to logistically manage. Luckily, I had no involvement in that, but try getting 500 plus people into a ski resort and make the most of a week's worth of time. It is such precious time when you've got this distributed team and you only get to see them really for 7 days of the year. Incredible gathering, so many learnings. I'm proud to have been a part of 2 of those before I moved to an advisory role. So some other remote first companies, GitHub, 700 plus employees. That is the code repository that WooCommerce sits on. Automatic, as I've said, Envision, another design team, Basecamp, incredible team to follow, Jason Fried. Buffer, they've shared all sorts of information around salaries and how to structure those with the remote teams. And if you're looking for further reading about Automatic, I strongly recommend The Year Without Pants, because that's how most remote workers work. And this is the story of Scott Birkin, who joined Automatic, worked there as a team leader for a year. His requirement whilst being interviewed, his request of Matt was that when he finishes up at Automatic, he'd like to write a book about the experience. And he's an incredible author, and it's very well documented. So just a TLDR, as we put it, too long, didn't read or didn't listen. Embrace open source. I cannot say that strongly enough. Open source, it is one of the most powerful ideas of our WordPress is one example of that, but you go to GitHub and you can learn all sorts of amazing things, and you can connect with potential business partners around the world. These days, it's very different to when we started our company in 2006. Capital was very much a requirement back then for most companies. We were a bit of an exception to that. These days, there's so many tools available to you at such affordable monthly subscriptions, all these SaaS businesses that exist that can help you manage either a physical team or a remote team. And creativity always tops capital. As well as being resourceful is the greatest resource. I firmly believe in that, and I think there's a sea of information, there's a sea of tools available. It is all about being resourceful at the moment, and meeting with and learning from individuals who have been there and done it, and going to all sorts of geeky meetups like WordCamps. And of course, never stop learning. And with all that said, I think I'm 20 minutes in, and I think we're going to do some Q&As. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much.